One of my favorite early Bible discoveries that I had for myself as a young man reading through the Bible. There was a guy who came to talk to the group I was at. He's like, you know what? You young people should be reading the Bible. And I was like, what? I mean, I like the Bible. People read it to me. I don't think like I have to read it. A dude made a really good point. He's like, you should read it now because you'll never read it as a kid again. If you wait to read it till later, then you will only ever have read the Bible through the eyes of an adult, and you will never read it through the eyes of a child. And the Bible says that there's something really special about that built-in perspective of a child. Jesus said there was something special about it. You should read it while you're young, and then you should read it again when you're not young, and then you should read it when you're old, because it's going to be different every time. I was like, dang, that makes sense. I'm reading this thing. So I got my Bible, and it's, hang on a second. Wait there. Don't go anywhere. Don't leave. I'm coming back. Just hang on a second. I'm getting a thing that you're not even going to be able to see, but you're going to be able to hear it. And so I got this Bible right here, this one that my dad gave me. I still have it. I got scribbles in it from when I was a tiny kid. I drew pictures in here. I mean, I wrote things in here literally in the 1980s. My great-grandma died. The first thing I wrote in this Bible was the date she died, and that is some rotten kid handwriting, but I meant well. And well, how about that? I wrote down all the birth dates of my parents, and I wrote down in my grown-up handwriting, I wrote down the date that my kid brother died. Huh. Well, that's something. So this Bible that my dad gave me, he gave it to me. He was like, hey, write in it. And I didn't know what to write in, so I didn't know what to do with it. And so eventually I figured out, like, well, you can underline things that make sense to you or that pop out to you that you like. And then this other dude came along and was like, you got to read it. You got to read the whole Bible while you're young, while you're a kid, because you'll have a unique set of perspective of eyes for it. So I did that. And I remember when I got to Acts, I noticed all by myself as a kid reading this, that early on in the book of Acts, it was all third person. Like they went and did this, they went and did that, that guy went and did this. And I was like, well, cool. That reads just like Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John that came before it. Those are the four accounts of the life of Jesus. Acts is what happens right after that with Jesus' followers. But then I got a little further into it, and I noticed there was a perspective change. And it started being, we did this, we did that. And I realized, whoa, whoever is writing Acts, he's on the trip now. Oh, that's so interesting. And I remember I had to go back and be like, where did he join up? Who is it? And without any help or anything, this was one of the first things I went and pieced together mostly for myself. And I have dates and everything written in here of when I was doing this homework in this time capsule Bible, my oldest of Bibles. And it's really fun. So I've always had a soft spot in my heart for that tiny yet very obvious little nugget of biblical interpretation from the book of Acts, that Luke, the author of Acts, uses we pronouns when he's on the trip and when he's a part of the book, and he uses not we or I pronouns when he's not a part of the book. I just think that's super interesting. We get the same thing here in Ezra, and so with almost certainty, we're getting stuff from Ezra himself when we get into chapter 8, as he is trying to capitalize on the opportunity put in front of him to go up once again by Artaxerxes, the king of Persia. And all of this is very, it's like a journal entry pretty much that gives us a look into Ezra's thought process as he realizes, as he embarks on this trip back to Jerusalem with the blessing of the king and all this money and everything, that he's got a serious problem. There is a really big deficiency in terms of his roster, in terms of the way his religious roster is built, if you will, that is going to make it super hard to do what God and Artaxerxes has charged Ezra with doing. And so we get this personal, I did this journal entry section of the book here in chapter 8, where we realize that Ezra knows he's got a problem and he's going to need, he believes, the help of God to get past it. The chapter doesn't start that eventfully. It's a whole bunch of lists of names, like all of these guys. This is who we got. We got 110 men from this family. We got 28 men from the descendants of Bebai and Zechariah, son of Bebai. And it's a bunch of stuff like that. Doesn't seem very important to you or me now. And a lot of the names in here are not like big hitters from the Bible necessarily, but why it does matter, these first 14 verses that give us all these names, is it's an indication once again that Ezra is trying to go back. He's trying to rebuild something, and he's trying to do it the right way. He's trying to go back to like the last good save point that he can remember. and restore point to right there in terms of the Israelite, the Jewish people's relationship with God. And so the lineages are important then. The mistake that he believes they made, or one of the big mistakes, was intermarrying with everybody and adopting all of their cultural ways. And so he doesn't want priests who are descended from the wrong people. Like Ezra, they need to be descended from Aaron. They need to be of the priestly line. Sure, you could probably get a lot more priests if you broke the rules, but then you're doing low integrity things to try to achieve a high integrity goal. Can't do that. Basic rule of existence. And Levites are the same way. I mean, it's got Levi in the name. There's certain people who are from a certain branch of the Jewish family tree. And, well, he's really short on Levites. He needs a ton more to make things function, but they're in very short supply. And by the time we get to the events of Ezra, these people are several generations removed from living in Jerusalem, which is now kind of a wild frontier and maybe not the most desirable town, especially compared with Babylon. Now, did you catch that is where Ezra is from? Most of the other action we've been looking at is centered around Susa. That was the favored palace of most of these Achaemenid Persian kings during the era we've been looking at. It's the setting for all of the Book of Esther. But Ezra isn't from there. Ezra is from Babylon. Dude literally lives in the shadow of the great palace and architectural monuments of Nebuchadnezzar, the very guy who broke Ezra's beloved temple and beloved temple sacrificial system. Ezra sees those things built by the hands of Nebuchadnezzar every single day of his life, and it nags at him because the same hands that built up those giant things tore down the house of the Lord in Jerusalem. And it eats at this guy. He wants to go get to it. Get what I need. Get on the road. Yeah, we got a temple up and running, but all the things that go with it, we don't have that yet. We haven't rebuilt the people yet. Get me back there. And so once again, in chapter 7, he gets the go-ahead from Artaxerxes, a lavish go-ahead. And now he's trying to accomplish that, but there's just only so many players in these key roles, only so many dudes to draw from in these key roles that are needed to have success when he gets to Jerusalem on this journey, that he can draw from in and around Babylon. So what we see as we move into the middle of Ezra chapter 8 is that the trip stalls out really early on. And they stop by a place called, here, verse 21, there by the Ahava Canal. I don't know where that is. I checked a couple places. I don't know if anybody really knows where that is. The theory is that it's somewhere around the Euphrates. I mean, the closer you are to Babylon, the more the earth and water works would have been complex. Canals would have been less likely with each passing mile that you got further away from the big civilization centers of Persia and Babylon. So I think it's a pretty good theory. It's probably not very far from Babylon. And he stops the whole thing. He's like, all right, hold up. We got a deficiency and our caravan does not have that deficiency addressed. What is the deficiency? Well, you got to go back to the roster from 538 BC that we saw in Ezra 2. Remember, we took a day and we went through that whole census of all the people who went back with Zerubbabel. What are we at? 60, 70 years earlier now during the reign of Cyrus the Great. And you'll recall in verse 36, we saw that there were a ton of priests, just tons of them, like 5,000 plus priests. Am I exaggerating? I am exaggerating. 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 4,100, 4,200, let's say, priests. That's a lot. Well, every priest is going to need a handful of attendants to manage all of the elaborate things that go along with this. This is a very complex job. If you're picturing a local pastor of an evangelical church, when you think of priest, you're picturing it wrong. There's a lot more specific religious daily duties, moving stuff around, doing things, preparing things, etc., before you even got into ministering to the people. So what we discover, though, is the ratio is all screwed up. There's only a few hundred Levites there to support these thousands of priests. That isn't going to work. And the Levites, again, you'll recall, they're actually descended. That's a ethnic lineage. And there were other servants that, maybe this deficiency existed earlier on in the history of things. That deficiency apparently was addressed by creating another class of temple servants, and specifically a group called Solomon's servants, who we discussed a while back. And there's like another 400 of those. So you've got a 10-to-1 ratio of priests to helpers, but you probably need that to be 10-to-1 the other way. So this is a big, big, big problem. The priests simply can't carry out their duties. And Ezra gets all these guys together. It was probably a lot to keep track of in the beginning of Ezra 8. And he's like, all right, let's get going. And then he discovers, well, we don't have any of the right people. I mean, it's so nice that you're all here and everything, but these aren't the right people. And so there's a pause. And it's not an entirely successful pause, but they do manage to round up, according to verse 19, 38 more Levites. And another, verse 20, they also brought 220 of the temple servants, and we get more clarification on it here than we did earlier in Ezra, a body that David and the officials had established to assist the Levites. All were registered by name. So the first great crisis of the journey is realizing we don't have the right number of people, we don't have the right volunteers, we are way short-staffed to go and accomplish this great goal of rebuilding the people and going back to the last good save point so that we can move forward into this new era of right relationship between God and his chosen people. And all Ezra can do is shut down the caravan and try to make it a little bit better. But then we're going to discover there's another problem on the road that has to be addressed before he can finish the trip. And that is going to take us through the end of chapter 9, mañana. Finally, I have a thought. It's kind of a personal thought. The guy was right when he said, hey, you should read the Bible as a child because you're not going to get to read it as a child anymore after you're not a child anymore. And I'm glad I did it, even though it was hard and I didn't understand a lot of it, because he was right. That moment was irreplaceable. I hear from tons of you, and I've got a pretty good sense of just who we are as a weird little internet community or whatever. I know there are a bunch of you who used to be in, but your faith, I mean, something happened and it's dinged up. I totally get it. I totally relate. I've really, really been there. I know there are a bunch of you who are in that spot where you were in a place of belief and now you're kind of in a place of you would like to do that again, but it's hard. I also know there are a bunch of you who straight up have never been in a place of belief, but it's intriguing to you. And so you have your antenna out for it and you're willing to think outside yourself and hang out with me, which is a huge honor, by the way. Thank you. Maybe some of you all in that camp have been thinking that reading through the Bible would be something that would make sense for people to do who have the faith thing on lockdown, have it dialed, have it figured out. And you're right. I mean, that's a really good thing for people of faith to do, read the Bible again and again and again. I think that's a great idea. But also you're in kind of a special spot right now. And I think it's something to be appreciated and savored as part of your story and as part of your process. And if you do become, like, let's say, just a straight up Christian, like a follower of God someday, it's going to be amazing when you read through the Bible with that set of lenses on. But also, you'll never be able to read the Bible as a not Christian again. And so it's kind of a cool opportunity to pick the thing up and see it through a certain set of lenses you might not have forever right now. But if maybe you were thinking, oh, it's something I'll get around to later, I don't know. You're you now, though. And where you are right now is a big deal. And it's important. And it's a set of perspectives that you'll never be able to duplicate or replace. And it's just, I don't know. You get it. That's my thought. Thanks for hearing me out on that. All right. I also think that I've now talked enough. I'm Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour podcast. Let's do this again soon.